Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Monday, March 22nd, 2021. And our top stories today, unraveling the mysteries of the brain and treating age-related disease. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Jonathan Gutenberg and Omar Abadea are both fellows with the McGovern Institute at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. We're excited to chat with you.
And we're excited about this. I think there's a lot of great developments coming out of MIT, coming out of the McGovern Institute. Omar, I want to start with you first. What exactly is the McGovern Institute? What should we know about it?
Great question. Yeah, the McGovern Institute is one of many institutes at MIT that do biomedical research. The McGovern Institute in particular is for doing a variety of brain research, and it goes across sort of cognitive neuroscience, studying diseases like neurodegeneration, and neuropsychiatric diseases like autism, to also molecular tool development. How can we do gene therapy in the brain? How can we deliver therapeutics to the brain? And so it's quite a diverse institute of people studying the brain, trying to understand how it works, but also develop tools for it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Omar. John, the brain is obviously a very complicated entity, very complicated thing. But you and Omar, you have your own separate lab. You're doing a lot of research here. What primarily is your focus on the research? I know Omar mentioned gene therapy as part of the McGovern Institute, but where are both of you really focused on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our lab, we like to focus really on how we can use molecular technologies to address many of the diseases that currently can't be cured by current therapies. So if you think about it, there are certain diseases where you get sick, you can take a pill, maybe that's an antibiotic if you have a bacterial infection. But there are many diseases where we just don't have ways to get at the core of the problem. And a lot of these are genetic diseases where if you are born with a certain error in your genome, it can lead to certain things like cystic fibrosis or sickle cell disease. So the question is, how do we develop new therapies that approach these diseases from a completely different angle? And in our lab, we like to think about molecular therapies where we can actually go into a patient and correct certain mutations. So if this patient has cystic fibrosis, how do we actually correct the mutations or deliver a new functional copy of the gene? So we like to address and think about how we can build tools for that. And coincidentally, a lot of the ways to approach this are actually drawn from natural discoveries, where we can take things out in the natural world that already affect DNA or bind to DNA and turn those into really powerful molecular therapies. Now, of course, it's a long trajectory to actually developing these therapies. We're at the first step of a very multi-tiered journey. But it's exciting to at least, in certain different models and animal models, be able to approach some of these really fundamental questions of how we can cure these new diseases.
Yeah, and Omar, we were joking beforehand, but it really is. Science is a lot of trial and error, but you guys have had some real good success, and it's been a lot of trial and some success along the way, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, it definitely has. I always joke that the Regan research is for basically repeating, because you end up repeating the same assay over and over for months or years. But yeah, I would say, when I was starting out, I thought research would be incredibly difficult. It always amazed me how people could do these long 5-year, 6-year studies and find all these amazing things. And I was like, could I ever do that or accomplish those heights one day? And I think, you just kind of have to dive in and just explore and be curious. And I think what has worked is really just throwing as many things against the wall, because I think 90% of what we try will fail, but eventually you find a foothold, you find some data signal somewhere, and you just keep following it. And then eventually, the thread unravels into an interesting, set of findings and a story. And at least in my experience, it eventually comes together. It may be painful for a year or two, but it's, and then another thing is a lot of times where we end up, I could not have predicted years before that's what I would be working on or that's where I would be. It really is kind of like a random walk where you just keep following things and you see where you go. And so, in many ways, I have no idea what I'll be working on probably in a year from now or 3 years from now, or, but that's part of the fun of being a scientist. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. And John, I mean, some of the diseases that are commonplace among the aging, our show is the Broadcast Retirement Network, or that's our network. And we're not just focused on retirees, but one of the big questions is about cognitive abilities and maintaining cognitive abilities. You hear about Alzheimer's, dementia, and there aren't cures to my knowledge yet. But are these things that you all are thinking about? How to help the brain, help us age better and
certainly
and wiser?
I think that when approaching diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, these kind of multifactorial diseases where there's a lot of components to it, it's really a two-part process. One, of course, is taking what we know about the diseases and trying to use that to approach the problem already. And so, for example, in Alzheimer's, there's a lot of hypotheses about the presence of amyloid. And how do we develop therapies that can approach that process? And we've worked a little bit on ways that we can use some of these genetic molecular therapies to change certain letters in the genome to produce less amyloid or have less negative effects. But the other end is that we really still don't know exactly what's going on in these situations. And how do we develop better tools to actually figure out what's going on in the brain during aging, during the development of these neurodegenerative phenotypes, these really horrible diseases. And so we can develop the next generation of cures. So along that line, our lab, Omar and I have been really interested in figuring out ways that we can better measure what goes on in the brain in either mice or potentially in people during these diseases. So then the next generation, 10, 15 years, the next generation of cures can build upon that knowledge. So it's really both taking what we know now about how these things work and using that to nominate potential ways to cure it, but also adding to that, corpus of knowledge so then we can continue the effort of developing therapies.
Yeah, well, guys, I want to take a very quick break. This is an incredible opportunity to learn at the cutting edge from both of you about what's happening in cognitive functions. Guys, hold on. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be back with Omar and Jonathan to talk more about brain research and what the future may hold. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Jonathan Gutenberg and Omar Abadea of the McGovern Institute. Gentlemen, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here.
So we talked a lot about what you're doing day to day in the lab, and that's all very important, developing treatments, or at least trying to identify where symptoms and things come from around the brain, and tools to handle the research. But let's talk about the practical applications, John. Where are we seeing some of this research actually come into play? And I believe my brother was telling me that you all had some work to do with some of the recent COVID pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, it's really an exciting time kind of, in biotechnology, because things are moving so quickly. And it's good that they are, because, there's obviously a really pressing need, especially with COVID. But you kind of see two things. One is that we talk about these molecular medicines like they could be far off, but there are already companies, actually many, in the Cambridge area, that are applying this principle of actually changing a patient's DNA to be able to treat certain diseases. For example, CRISPR Therapeutics, which is right down the block from us, actually, they've already treated a patient with sickle cell anemia and been able to cure the disease by correcting just a single letter in her genome. And so it's going to be really amazing to see, now there's probably like 5 or 6 companies in the, just within a mile radius of us doing new genetic therapies. In addition, there are other things. You talked about the COVID pandemic. So Omar and I are co-founders, along with a couple other professors, of a company called Sherlock Biosciences. And Sherlock actually uses some of the CRISPR technologies we've been developing in the lab to do diagnostics. So they actually have a product for using the CRISPR proteins and their programmable nature to actually detect the presence of the SARS-CoV-2 genome. So you can see that there are applications across therapeutics and diagnostics and basic research of these technologies.
So Omar, you mentioned the RE and research is oftentimes repeat, but this is a real practical application in the heart of a pandemic, being able to come up with a process that can actually be helpful today, right now. How does that make you? I mean, that must make you feel, both of you feel great inside, and actually, is a proof point in terms of your research.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our space, therapeutics are definitely, the shinier, more exciting thing that, scientists want to work on, because, you make a drug and that can save, hundreds of thousands of people. Whereas diagnostics, although they are incredibly important in the medical sort of pipeline, they're not as direct in saving lives. And I think, we've been working on CRISPR diagnostics for many years, probably since 2016 or so. And as we started our new lab, we were starting to lean more towards therapeutics, because, we had started this company and it was taking a lot of our original papers and findings to try to make an actual product. But what happened is back in January of 2020, when this pandemic was kind of starting to take off in Asia, we started getting a lot of, emails, and our colleagues were also getting a lot of emails from people in China saying it would be great if we could help do something with our CRISPR diagnostic work to try to make, easy, cheap testing available. Because at that time, people really were not testing for the virus. And so we ended up spinning up a lot of our CRISPR diagnostic work again in our lab, and we're collaborating with Feng Zhang as well, our PhD advisor across the street, to try to make this happen. And we had a team of probably 6 or 7 people working on this to make a COVID test. We were able to put out white papers online to help ship kits around the world. We published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine on this testing over like hundreds of clinical patients. And we've even got a device firm to try to help help us make a sort of miniature Apple HomePod looking device that can run the chemistry, so someone could swab themselves and then test. And we're currently trying to get that through the FDA process to get that to the finish line. It's taken a little bit longer to get the whole product to come together, but I think it's been very special to try to apply our skills towards something so pressing for human society. And I think it's also great that it brings diagnostics again to the forefront, because the biggest way to fight a virus in a pandemic is actually just to rapidly test and isolate people so you stop the spread, and that can actually save a lot of lives compared to just the drugs or the antibody therapies. I think it's been a fun process getting back in the diagnostic game, and we're hoping we can make a difference soon with our product.
Yeah. And John, I mean, technology. When we first met offline, I mean, technology is a big part. You guys use a lot of technology, computers, artificial intelligence. I'm sure you're using the whole gamut of resources of the university to try to work on better diagnostics, but also some of these therapeutics as well.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about doing research these days is that we can draw from advances not only in biology and biotechnology, but across the board. So it's really amazing to see how these kind of really cutting edge concepts of, AI, machine learning can start to cross-pollinate. And, for example, Google, an Alphabet subsidiary, DeepMind, they had a actual machine learning program that could predict the fold of proteins, and it actually did amazingly well. And so it's really neat to see how these advances in other domains can come through and allow us to do really crazy stuff. We have robots in the lab that can help us out to do assays. We can analyze large amounts of data. So yeah, it's great to see all these things come together to really accelerate the pace and development of different cures and diagnostics.
Omar, what's the future hold for the Abu Ghut lab? I mean, where do you guys see things kind of? You obviously have a lot of brain power. You're focusing on cognitive function. You're doing diagnostics. What does the future look like in terms? Where do you hope to get to? Is it just more resources to help identify and solve some of these brain impairments and challenges that many people have, or is it therapeutics? What can you give us in terms of what's the future?
Well, there's more than 5,000 genetic diseases where you can point to a specific mutation or genetic change and say, hey, like if we could correct that, you would help these patients. And I think, a lot of our goal is to try to treat all of those diseases. So until, that's done, I don't think our job really is done. And a lot of those diseases require new tools. You need ways to target the cells that are actually involved. Once you make a gene editing tool, it's not the only step. Like if it's involved in a very specialized cell type, somewhere deep in the lung tissue, you have to be able to get your tool to that cell. So there's a lot of delivery questions there as well. And so there's all these tools on the pipeline of building a gene therapy that I think, we're looking at developing and working on for the next 10 to 20 years. And it's going to take a long time for, I think, our field and developers to actually address all of these different diseases. And beyond that, I think, we want to develop tools to identify what every cell in the human body does, right? We're made up of, trillions on trillions of cells, and we're just starting to understand that each cell in some ways is uniquely different from other cells through single cell sort of sequencing technologies and whatnot. We want to make tools to better map those cells, map which of those cells at a very high resolution are involved in different diseases, and continue pushing our understanding of how to treat every biomedical disease. Because I'll tell you, even though we can point to the causes of these 5,000 genetic diseases, there's many more that still have complex underlying causes that are not mapped. So for example, like the autism spectrum, right? There isn't like one gene and one mutation that causes autism, right? It's very complex. People are still trying to understand how you get the characteristics you witness in autistic people from the underlying genetic variants. And that's just an example of one complex disease, but there's many more. And so there's still a lot of biology to understand.
Yeah, and John, I guess just to wrap up, I mean, there are a lot of families who have parents and loved ones who are afflicted. I guess I can't speak for you, but I mean, I would think that it's very rewarding to know that you're having a potential impact on something that will impact someone's life either today or in the future, or some family member down the road of someone. This is really impacts society. This really impacts society.
Yeah, I think that, it's really what we can be is, Omar, I think we should really be grateful that we can work on technologies that have the ability to, have an impact on society in this form. I mean, all we, given our skill set, it's really our duty to try to develop these things. And I mean, it's really, I think, what gets us out of bed every morning. It allows us to, science, you have to be at the bench a long time. And as Omar said, there's a lot of failures, but it's nice to always remember that, kind of at the end of the day, really what you're fighting for, which is the ability to take a lot of this suffering of patients and, fix that and cure that. So, yeah, I think that we're really lucky in that respect that we get to be able to do this.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's a pleasure just catching up with you for 15 minutes. It's absolutely astounding the work that you're doing, you and your colleagues at the McGovern Institute, and for that matter, those in Cambridge and around the world who are trying to tackle these horrific diseases that are really impacting people's lives. Great to have you on. And look, we look forward to having you back again as you discover more and more, make more and more discoveries. Take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks so much for having us.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our newsletter, The Morning Pulse, and our website. We're back again tomorrow, so until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.